My boyfriend of almost 3 years told me a series of white lies that to me seem more serious. Can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is actually indicative of a bigger problem. My boyfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years, living together for 2. We have a pretty good relationship, obviously with ups and downs, but we make it work and are happy. A little background on me and my boyfriend. I come from a single-parent home. My father was absent. My mother was and is by no means perfect, but she did her best with what she had. We were poor. Life was never easy for us, but we had each other. Since I was pretty young, I've wanted to pay her back someday. I've worked incredibly hard to be able to do so. I help her financially as much as I can and regularly pay her bills //send her cash. I'm also her only living child now, as my brother passed away 5 years ago, which basically left me to help her. I don't care, I love my mother, and the right thing to do is to help her when she needs it. But is stressful. This is relevant because my boyfriend described coming from a somewhat similar past, and it is something we have bonded over. Having the mutual experiences seemed to bring us closer. He told me he also helped his parents financially, and we would often vent to each other about the stress it brings. I am not one to confide in many people, so having someone who I felt like actually understood me was meaningful to me. So here is where the lies come in, and I need someone to either tell me I'm not crazy and this is horror, or that I am crazy and this isn't a huge deal. I'm fine with either. When we met, my boyfriend lived in a condo in a pretty swanky part of the city. I live in the US Northeast. He told me he owned that apartment / condo. I found this to be interesting / odd because he was 28 at the time, and I know this property is upwards of $650,000 on the low end, and he was in an entry-level job for only like 2 years, so the numbers just didn't really add up. Whatever, maybe he's good at saving. But then, since living together, I never once saw a piece of mail for a mortgage payment, electric bill, taxes, nothing. Not for 2 whole years. Very odd. Also, when we started living together, he didn't have his room rented out in the former apartment yet, so he was still responsible for that portion of the rent. He would send a Venmo payment to his mother on the 1st of every month for his portion. I don't own property, but I can't think of a scenario where I would Venmo my mother to pay the mortgage on a property I supposedly own. Getting more odd. He would then go to his parents' house for an afternoon and come back really upset. Usually when I would ask why, it was because they were having financial problems and he needed to help them out. I totally understood this and supported him. He literally has cried on my shoulder about this many times. He tried to start a company years back and ended up getting into debt somehow. He told me this debt was $17,000 and that he paid it off. I'm confused because I met him only 2 to 3 years after the supposed debt accrued / company dissolved, and it was already paid off. He told me when he moved back home after the business failed, he was $17,000 in debt and living at his parents' house working at a minimum wage job. How someone with a minimum wage job pays off that much debt in 3 years, I'll never know. We got into a fight a few weeks ago and I finally had enough and confronted him about these things. He doesn't help his parents, they actually pay his phone bill, and this was all a lie. He doesn't own that apartment, he didn't pay off that debt from his company. He initially told me his parents helped pay it off and then like 3 minutes later, came clean. And said that his business partner paid it off, so I have literally no idea what the truth is there, and if anything, in my eyes. His parents are the ones who are financially supporting him. So now, I'm dating a 31 years old man who doesn't pay his own phone bill, was lying to me and / or completely fabricating aspects of his life for 3 years. And then when confronted about it, continued to make up lies and then came clean about them 5 minutes later. I'm obviously concerned that he could lie for this long, about fundamentally important things like our values, and so on. I sincerely thought I would marry this man. He seemed to understand me like no one else and to be a truly caring and genuine person. Now I'm having a hard time rationalizing actually planning a life around someone who would not only lie about their background and family etc. but also financial aspects. Aside from that, I now can't tell what is the truth and what is a lie. I've also noticed other things he has lied about, called him out on it, and he has denied it outright to my face. I see this as a form of gaslighting, as I know I'm not wrong, but he is trying to convince me otherwise. Am I overreacting? Is this a white lie that went haywire? Or is this actually a series of complete and utter bullshit used to manipulate me? And also, is it insane for me to actually consider a life with this man? I've been with my wife for 2 years. She has a 21-year-old son. I have a 14-year-old daughter from my previous marriage. My late wife passed away in 2014. She left a few things for our daughter, including a gold jewelry set. Her mom was devastated she didn't get to gift the set to our daughter on her wedding day. I keep it in my closet since it's expensive and my daughter is too young to have it. I'll hopefully gift it to her on her wedding. We were sitting in the kitchen when my stepson was hesitant to ask me something. We're in good terms but have our fair share of arguments. He said his fiancée was taking something from his mother's and my closet, saw the jewelry set and liked it very much. He asked if he could borrow it so his fiancée can wear it at her cousin's wedding. I found this unacceptable. I told him his fiancée had no business being in the bedroom and that the jewelry isn't mine. It's for my daughter. He asked me if my daughter will agree to let him borrow it if he talked to her. I told him not to even talk about it again. He got all pissed and said things I do not remember. When he and his fiancée were at the wedding, I discovered that the jewelry set was gone. I told my wife and we looked all over the house. I called my stepson to tell him about calling the police because I really thought someone stole the set. He said there was no need, that he borrowed it and will return it after they get back from the wedding. I yelled at him and told him to come back with it right then. I kept calling him till 12 a.m. when he told me to stop calling and that he'd bring it in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night. I felt terrible. In the morning he showed up at 10 a.m. He didn't bring it and started stalling, saying he forgot he'd bring it the next day. At this point it was clear he gifted it to his fiancée and was stalling. I got so mad I told him I will be pressing charges if he doesn't return the set today. We got into an argument. My wife said his fiancée was the one who wanted the jewelry set. But he was the one who took it and it's not even mine, it's my daughter's, which made it worse. Because I'm responsible for whatever happens to it. His grandparents berated me after I told them this and got mad and defended him when I said that I will be pressing charges. He stole and needed to be responsible for his actions. He didn't respond to my final calls, so now I've given him one last chance, and it's over. I pressed charges today. They're saying calling the police was extreme and cruel. They're all convincing me to back down. He was replying to me sarcastically when I said I'd get the authorities involved, and he didn't take me seriously. His mom said she'd try to talk to him, but I had enough of him stalling, hoping I'll just let it go, so he can make his fiancée happy. I feel like an irresponsible idiot. I can't even look at my daughter without feeling frustrated and infuriated. I'm hurt, but what's worse is that this is my daughter's property that I couldn't take care of. My wife allows them into the room, although I told her not to several times. They're not kids and there should be some boundaries. Since my wife and I got married 3 years ago, things have been off. I know that people grow and change with time, but around our wedding, my wife changed drastically. She bleached her dark brown hair blonde right before the ceremony. And I honestly thought I was in the wrong church for a split second when she came down the aisle. We moved into our house right after the honeymoon, and she went into full domestic mode. We'd shared cleaning duties before, but once we moved into the house, she became insistent on doing everything before I could even get to it. Since this is our first house, I thought it was some kind of homeowner nesting thing, but it never stopped. Her hair color is none of my business, and I think most people would be happy not to have to clean. So I honestly didn't really think much of either of those things at the time. The big thing has always been how closed off she got after the wedding. When we were dating, she'd tell me long rambling stories about her feelings and rant to me when she was upset and all that. And I liked hearing about what was going on inside her head. After the wedding, that stopped pretty abruptly. If I ask her how her day is, she will only ever tell me that it was fine or super. She doesn't talk to me about her feelings anymore, ever, even when I explicitly ask, "How do you feel about X?" She also stopped telling me about anything important that happened to her. About a year after we got married, her grandfather died. Did she tell me she'd lost her grandfather? No. She told me that she had to go to a conference for work on the other side of the country, which I thought nothing of. On the second day she was gone. Her older brother texted me to tell me that my in-laws had really missed seeing me at the funeral. When I called her to ask why in the ever-loving hell she didn't tell me, and then lied about it, all she would say was, "I didn't want to trouble you. You have a lot on your plate." After that, she went on a couple of spontaneous family trips. She's really close to her family, so the first time she said she was going camping with her brother at their alma mater. I didn't think a lot of it other than to be slightly disappointed and confused that I wasn't invited, because her brother's cool and the three of us go camping together a lot. But the second time, I started hearing alarm bells. I'd like to say I'm a more secure man, but after the second spontaneous family trip, my wheels started spinning and I started to think that maybe she was cheating. This was a weird insecurity in the back of my mind for a while, since she wasn't showing any other big signs of cheating. She wasn't guarded about her phone and hadn't changed her routine / appearance. A few weeks ago, she told me she was pregnant. I was over the moon about it until I asked her how many weeks along she was, and she nonchalantly said about 12 or 13. She'd been pregnant for like 3 months before she even bothered to tell me. She's not really showing at all, and she doesn't usually drink, so I had been completely in the bloody dark. I honestly hadn't even suspected. That was kind of it for me. I was sure she was cheating, and that it wasn't my kid. I thought there was no possible way that a woman would keep her pregnancy a secret from her husband for 3 months. So I snooped. Yes, I know I was wrong, but I wanted proof that she'd been having an affair before I moved out. One of my best buddies from college is a divorce attorney, and when I asked him what I should do, he sent me the info for a key logger. I installed it on my wife's laptop and was prepared for the worst. Now, I feel like what I found is somehow worse than her cheating. I didn't find any steamy messages, but I found out that she keeps a diary in a Word document that she writes in every day. I know I should have just stopped once I knew she wasn't cheating, but once I saw my name in her diary, I couldn't stop. I read all of it. All 7 separate documents, going back to way before we'd even met. Turns out she's not cheating. She's depressed, hates herself, and has absolutely no trust in me. All of the stuff I've been confused and bothered by has some kind of sad, self-loathing explanation. She hates having blonde hair, but she writes, "I know he'd divorce me if I went back to being a brunette." Because wives are supposed to be blonde almost every week. The "wives are supposed to be" thing is tangled up in everything. She thinks wives are supposed to be quiet, which is why she doesn't talk to me anymore. She thinks wives are supposed to make things easier for their husbands, not harder. Which is why she didn't tell me when her grandfather died. It just goes on and on and on. She didn't tell me when she got a huge promotion and a raise because he'd leave me in a heartbeat if he knew I made more money than he does. Men can't handle that. It hurt to know that she thinks of me as some kind of one-dimensional 1950s husband. And I've been racking my brain to think of anything I could have done to make her think this way. What I can't handle is that she'd lied about the big stuff. I honestly don't know if I can forgive her for not telling me about the miscarriages. The spontaneous family trips were actually her miscarrying 2 of our children, one at 5 weeks, the other at about 10. She went and stayed with her parents while she was recuperating, and her brother and sister came to support her. But not me. I didn't get to be there for her, because she thinks I would leave her immediately if I knew that she'd killed our children. She's convinced that she caused both miscarriages because she smoked pot for a long time before we got married. For what it's worth, it sounds like her family tried both times to get her to tell me, but she wouldn't. She finally told me about this pregnancy because her parents threatened to tell me she didn't. I'm just absolutely confused. I don't even know what to think right now. I'm just so baffled because everything she says about me in her diary is insanely nice. She goes on for pages and pages about how much she loves me and how she thinks I'm her soulmate and how she would do anything for me. I just can't understand why she thinks that I would leave her. Knowing that she's spent the last 3 years walking on eggshells around me, convinced that I would leave her at the drop of a hat is just so confusing and awful. I feel like our marriage is some kind of lie. The woman I thought was self-confident and ready to take on the world is actually full of self-loathing and really, really depressed. I don't know her at all. She's been suffering silently with depression long before we met. She has no faith in me, no trust. She thinks that every hug and kiss I give her and every "I love you" I say is a lie. I just don't know what to do. She obviously needs serious help, but I don't know how to get it for her. I can't tell her that I read her diary. If she has zero trust in me now, I can't even imagine what she'd think if she knew if I read 6 years worth of her private thoughts. I feel like I need to get my in-laws on board somehow, but I don't know what to say to them. I know I can't ignore this, but I feel like any move is the wrong move. I got my son a 7K motorcycle for his 18th birthday this past June. My son is obsessed with automobile and loves motorcycles. In his room he has plenty of models and posters of motorcycles of all types. His bio dad passed away when he was just 12, now I'm married to my current husband and he has kids of his own. My husband has always been against my son's interest in motorcycles. He thinks I'm encouraging him to be reckless, distracting him from school and by extension his future, and spoiling him and blowing away money by spending 7K on a motorcycle. This caused some tension between him and my son, so I told him to stop complaining about it. Around 2 weeks ago, my son's motorcycle went missing. We opened a police report but nothing came out of it. It just disappeared. My husband had a smirk on his face the entire time, just walking around saying, "I told you so. You just wasted your money." This was unbearable to hear, to be quite honest. My mother-in-law visited few days ago. She was talking about the other house my husband owns and mentioned seeing a motorcycle. One that's similar to the one that we lost in my husband's carriage while she was cleaning it. She goes to clean that house weekly even though it's empty. My husband plans on giving it to his kids as inheritance. I was puzzled. I asked if she was certain, but she showed me a photo she took of it which confirmed that it was indeed my son's motorcycle. I immediately rushed to call my husband and confront him about it. He admitted that he took and hid the motorcycle in his garage as a last resort after me and his stepson kept brushing him and his thoughts off about the 7K being spent on something unnecessary and that could cause issues. I blew up at him demanding he return it. He refused and told me he had been considering selling it and giving the money back to me so I could use it wisely this time. I told him I was serious and that I'd call the police. He literally said, "This is a family matter and cops can't do shit about it." I had enough. I called the cops soon as I ended the call with him. The motorcycle was found and returned. But my husband had to be taken in since there was an open file about the motorcycles going missing. He was let go eventually, but he was livid with me. He came home yelling about how awful what I did was and how crazy my behavior was. I refused to engage in the argument, but he told his entire family about it and they judged me for calling the police on my own husband, even though I already asked him to return it. He said he was just looking out for my son and that one day we'll realize that he was right, but only when it's too late. My son isn't speaking to me or my husband. I feel horrible about the whole situation and am starting to think I handled this the wrong way.